This is the Baltimore City Council Judiciary and Legislative Investigations Committee. We are here for LO 18-0040, Legislative Oversight Investigative Hearing on the Department of Transportation. Tonight's hearing is going to be twofold. This hearing was jointly called by Councilmember Scott and myself in conjunction with Council President Young and his office. During the week of July 9, 2018, I'm going to touch on the part that I asked you all in here for tonight first, and then I'll move to Councilman Scott. First, let me acknowledge my colleagues. Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark from the 14th District, Vice Chair of the committee. Council President Bernard C. Jack Young. Councilman Brandon Scott, 2nd District member of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Zeke Cohen, 1st District. Councilman Isaac Gitzy Schleifer, 5th District. Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District. Then to my right, Councilman Leon Pinkett, 7th District member of the committee. Councilman John Bullock, 9th District member of the committee. To my immediate right is Matt Peters, staff to the committee. To my far right is Kara Kuntz, Legislative Director for Council President Jack Young. We have Karen Stokes and Poetry Deal representing Mayor Catherine Pugh. The first piece of this hearing has to do with the following. During the week of July 9th, 2018, downtown Baltimore experienced a significant increase in traffic congestion and gridlock. Baltimore City Department of Transportation indicated that the increased congestion on many streets was the result of its retiming of traffic signals and that it is working to resolve the problem. The committee has requested that the department come to the hearing with a detailed and complete list of all traffic signal modifications made and on which date, and a detailed plan along with the specific timeframes for how this issue will be immediately resolved. In addition, the committee asks that the consultant who is either currently contracted with the city or is being brought on specifically to handle the traffic signal synchronization issue be present and prepared to answer questions. There is an explanation which DOT will provide, which the director and I discussed. Now I'd like to pass it on to Councilman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the council, for the second portion of this, when you think about the Department of Transportation, the citizens of Baltimore think about the core services. So, as we know, traffic lights are very important in synchronization of traffic lights so people are able to move throughout our city in efficient and effective manners that's both safe for them and pedestrians. But we also think about the other kind of things. There are sidewalks, and in particular tonight, we hear about streets. During the council budget process, it was requested of the Department of Transportation to provide to the council over the past 3 fiscal years all the streets that were resurfaced throughout the city by council district, but also the funding by council district as well. Unfortunately, we did not receive that information. We had a follow-up email about that information to the Department of Transportation. We did not receive that information even after that. We did receive some information early this week, and we appreciate that, but we're still not seeing the information in the form that we requested, and actually following that, the request was expanded to the last 5 fiscal years based on the fact that we did not receive the information that we asked for before. So hopefully tonight we're able to have a conversation about this and the traffic issue so that we, the council, can be better informed, but also inform our citizens. And I'll go to another point about the street resurfacing to begin with. For us, we believe as a council and the council that passed an open data law that this kind of information should be purposely put out for the public through Open Baltimore so that council members are not even having to give that information to their constituents, that they can get that online as required by law. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Council President Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My main concern is about the backlog of traffic. It normally takes me 5 minutes from my house to get to City Hall. Now it's taking me almost 20 minutes, sometimes 25 minutes to get to City Hall. This morning when I got here, after maneuvering the traffic, I sit in my truck and watched the traffic on Fayette Street, going both directions, backed up. I watched the traffic at Baltimore Street, backed up. And this is, I mean, really most of it was before you got here, Ms. Purcell, but it seemed like it just got worse. And, you know, we're getting tons of complaints from just about everybody. I know that the Civic Center been complaining. about it. What they call it, Royal Farms Arena. They were complaining about the backup because their customers are complaining. We have business people calling us about the backup. I don't know what happened on, I think it's St. Paul Street. Did y'all do something different on St. Paul Street? One of those streets? One of the main streets? Oh, you got to talk, Mike. Construction? Okay, and that's another thing. Some of these construction projects, closing lanes without, anybody knowing that the lanes are going to be closed, and that caused a big problem as well. We just want to see some, movement so we can get the traffic through. I noticed, I think it was Wednesday, because I left Thursday, that you had some steels out there directing the traffic. As much as possible in that early phase in the morning when it's rush hour traffic, I think you all need to have them out there so they can keep the flow of the traffic going, because it's really causing a lot of problems. If you read some of the comments that people be making on Facebook and on in the newspapers and stuff like that, it's really bad, and we just want something done. I do want to commend Department of Transportation for the signal at Fayette and Gay, because at least 3 cars can get through now as opposed to 1. Yeah, sometimes 4. But that's a great improvement. But we want the department to move forward and get these lights synchronized so that the flow of traffic won't be as heavy as it has been, because it's really bad. I don't know if anybody noticing it, but it's bad.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to add one more thing. I received over 300 complaints in a 48-hour period, and I know there's a common misnomer that people that are driving in downtown are commuters. Downtown is the fastest growing residential neighborhood in the city. We have 6,000 residents in downtown. These are people that drive in downtown, that live downtown, that are coming home from work or going to work in the morning. These are people in the surrounding neighborhoods on the South Baltimore Peninsula, on the west side, that live in Councilman Pinkett and Councilman Bullock's district, that live in Midtown, that live to the east in the 1st District. These are folks that live in our city. So I want to start off by saying that and acknowledging that, so that there's no confusion about whether or not this is something that we're doing for commuters or people that are coming in and out of the city. By and large, the overwhelming majority of those 300 people live in my district or live in a surrounding neighborhood immediately outside of my district. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to DOT. And Director Porchio, if you could introduce everyone on your team along with position title that's here with you today, please.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Michelle Pouchot, Director of the Department of Transportation. And could I ask my team to stand up, introduce themselves and their position? And we'll start with Muhammad Khalid.
So we need you to speak into the microphone because, yep, all the mics are on, yep.
Muhammad Khalid, Chief Engineer for DOT.
Frank Murphy, Senior Advisor to the Director, DOT.
Theo Ngongong, Deputy Director for Planning and Policy, started last week.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
We may have others join us to answer questions, but they'll come forward and give their name if that's needed. I'd like to make a quick statement. I have a few slides that I think directly address some of the questions you presented, and we'd be happy to answer any other questions. What I wanted to focus on today is 4 things, and I do want to start by saying I'm one of those people that live downtown, and I walk downtown all the time. And for pedestrians, the congestion affects us differently, but it still affects us. And so I was seeing the problem as well, and we were trying to attack it, but I'll talk a little more about how we got from where we started to where we ended up. And so I'm going to talk about 4 things. First, our vision for and the benefits of changing traffic patterns and why we made changes to the system. Second, what issues we experienced during the implementation process. Third, what steps we are taking to restore our system back to baseline. And fourth, our plan moving forward to ensure that we continue to improve traffic patterns throughout Baltimore. So first, reducing traffic and congestion improves quality of life for residents, enhances business environment, allows visitors to fully enjoy all the wonderful things we have here in the city of Baltimore. But it also enhances pedestrian and bicycle movement because we all have to move through the intersections and along the right-of-way. DOT launched its safety program this spring that we called a Don't Block the Box program. It was one of the components of our safety program. And with that, we had a plan that was designed to improve traffic flow, to improve pedestrian safety, and to reduce transit running times throughout downtown. Synchronization and optimization was to be an added element to help improve with this program. Traffic synchronization is a very delicate balance. It is a very intricate technological program, and it's really critical that the interdependencies of each intersection is closely looked at, not only in a designated area, but throughout the system. Since our most recent changes, which was over 10 years ago, we've been slowly making minor changes to the system. Small imbalances, these small changes, can create an imbalance in the system. Unfortunately, what we did resulted in that imbalance. Our system is pretty antiquated, so many of our traffic control boxes, those are the boxes that's the brain that tells the signals how to work. Many of them are no longer on an interconnected telecommunication system. And so while we could change the technology and see in our traffic command center what we were doing, while we could model that change in that center and anticipate what would happen, we had to manually change many of the boxes. Those manual changes are harder to predict. Not having upgraded our system, our timing in 10 years is far too long. We came to you and talked to you about upgrading the system when we talked about synchronization, but most importantly, this year in the budget, in our CIP, we allotted unprecedented amounts of monies to be able to deal with this problem that I'm talking about. So, unfortunately, over time, over a matter of days, we went from bad to worse. And then what we found is that the system was beginning to be out of alignment, is what I would call it. The new timing patterns reduced congestion in some areas of the downtown and really helped with reducing blocking the box more than anything else. But in other areas of the downtown, we reached total gridlock. We knew we had to attack the problem. We kept tweaking, and we determined we had to turn the signal system back. We could no longer continue this incremental change that we suspected was creating further misalignment. There's something interesting you'll see when we show you the dates in which signals were changed. We believe that there were other unexpected forces that really exacerbated the problem. We now believe we've gotten the system back. We've returned it to baseline, the baseline that existed 10 years ago with some minor tweaks for bus prioritization. But with that, we're at a stable place. And what we know is that now the traffic is flowing better, and we feel that it's more like the way it was before we began this process. Mm-hmm. We continue to monitor our activities and to make proper adjustments. And we have other things that we did every day that we'll talk about as we show you the slides. But that's my overall presentation. These slides get to your questions. So our first slide is a map. This map shows all of the intersections that were retimed during the process that we were working on reducing
Can you,
blocking the
I hate
box.
to disturb you, but can you talk into the mic because it's being
Okay,
televised?
I'm sorry.
People can't actually hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. The circles in green are the primary intersections. Those are 13 primary intersections. Those are primary because that is where we are planning to rotate our traffic enforcement officers in order to change behavior and begin to enforce don't block the box. The other intersections are what we have been calling the areas of influence. We knew we needed to have a critical mass of signals in order to make the timing changes effective. Next slide. These are the 13 intersections listed down the left-hand corner. Across the top are the dates that we made changes, and as you can see, every intersection had changes on every one of those dates. We began June 15th after our hearing and after we put our program together. And then we began observing and changing over a 2-week period. What I wanted to point out to you is that July 4th, July 6th week. So we believe the anomaly that occurred is that's a big holiday week. And because the holiday was in the middle of the week, we believe we saw more people not coming downtown to come to work than you would usually experience. Because of that, we made adjustments based on observations that were flawed, quite frankly. And so when we all returned to work on July 10th, I believe it is that the Monday, we experienced what we saw that day, the beginning of major gridlock. On the next day, the 11th, which was, I think the Monday was actually the 9th.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So on the 10th, we went out and tweaked again. On the 11th, we saw it didn't work. On the 12th, we moved it back to baseline. We knew that was the only way we could know and have a predictable response to how the signals were operating. I believe another benefit is that what I've learned is since we did that full optimization back in 2010, we've been tweaking for 8 years. And so by returning it to a baseline that really was produced citywide, we did the downtown as the first area of the city. We had a fully integrated traffic system that then worked better throughout our streets. Not much has been done outside of the downtown. So in 8 years, a lot was done. By returning it to the baseline now, we have confidence where our signals are. We know exactly how they relate to each other throughout the city. We believe now we truly have done, Mr. President, what you wanted us to do, optimize the system. But a lot more still needs to be done, and I'll talk about that in the next slides. So what did we do? On Monday, we began what we call all hands on deck. All hands on deck involved bringing the senior team in, and I must say, Mr. Ngangang, who had just been here for about a week, I asked him to lead the team. We brought everybody in the room together. We not only talked about the signals, but we got all the TOs there, and we began to deploy our traffic enforcement officers on the street to help move the traffic through more effectively. We called in our permit people. Our permit folks, we found out where we had issued permits. We looked at if we had any, we have what we call what do we call our BGE permits? What do we call them? Yeah, we have blanket permits with some of the utilities. We closely monitored the blanket permits. We had our inspectors deployed downtown to check the permits, to investigate the work that was done. On many days, sometimes utilities are out there working as if there is an emergency, so we really looked closely at if it was truly an emergency or not. And so we started seeing improvements both from having the people there, and at that point, we changed the signals back. We're now up to Wednesday. And so the other things we did, we called in our contractors. We sent letters to every contractor that we know that has permits to do work in the city. Not only those that are working for private entities, we sent them to our contractors that work on the conduit system. We sent it to our contractors that work on our streetlight system. Everybody. Alerting them that if their permits were not active, were not current, that they needed to get off of the streets. We began communications with our partners, our key partners, you here in the room. I must say, I wish I had done more, but the days seemed too short. We were really running around trying to get it under control. And last but not least, what I want to say about that is that 48 hours, for me, like all of the drivers, walkers, bikers, cyclists, those days seemed very long because it was really difficult what we experienced on those days. Next slide, please. Moving forward. We've been monitoring every day. Every morning we've had an on-call. We've had all of our teammates report what they're seeing on the street. We're looking closely at our permit process. I must say I was really happy the downtown bid called a meeting yesterday of something we had been working on, which is how we improve what we allow and what we see and what's happening on the street. Amma Bindi, who's not here tonight, she's our process engineer in DOT. She attended that meeting, and we're working closely with them on how to improve our process and work together at how to attack these kinds of issues in the downtown. They're an important partner to us, and I think with their efforts over the last few days, we really want to better embrace that. Continued communication is paramount. Councilman, this is your district. I must say, I didn't know what was going on, those first couple days. And so I couldn't reach out and tell you or anybody else what was going on, because it was our best intent to make things better. We have a very capable staff in DOT. They took on the charge in-house to do this, but this was beyond their capabilities. And so we had to unravel what we did and get it back to where it needed to be. Warning phase, we really want to work with you in deploying the Don't Block the Box program, because really it's about improving the throughput and reducing congestion. We need to maybe land on a warning period and use that warning period to help people understand. I believe I'm seeing change not in all drivers, but in many. I see many who stop at the stop bar now. I think just from being educated about, from reading in the papers, hearing on the news, and knowing what the council and the mayor have done in terms of trying to improve traffic. We want to continue to promote alternatives to modal choice. And as I talked about, not blocking the box, reducing congestion really affects us all. If we can make using transit better, it really reduces congestion. I don't want to go too much into talking about congestion, but congestion is a part of our downtown being viable and a lot of people working there. And what we really need to do is provide for other means for people to safely and conveniently get in and out of downtown, so we can continue to reduce the number of vehicles in a very congested area. And so we'll continue to work on all those things. And I'd like for Muhammad Khalid to come up, because from the last hearing, we talked a little bit about our financial program and where we are in terms of dedicating a lot more, millions of dollars more, to this much needed improvement. Muhammad's going to walk you through that.
And good afternoon again.
Hold up.
I mean, this was a slide, is very similar. We presented that during the Don't Block the Box hearing. I just thought that we provide you a quick update on where we are. We have really been expeditiously expediting these projects that Michelle mentioned, that how critical they are, and we have $22 million of funding that is available for signal upgrades. To start with the signal reconstruction projects, we have $7 million. We are expected to start about next month, and it will take 2 years to complete. There's about 28 or 29 signals will be upgraded, complete upgrades will be done. Signal rewiring, as you know, a lot of our wires get chewed up by snow, ice, and salt. And that's a major effort that we're going to start with the signal rewiring, $500,000. That's, again, is starting sometime next month, and that will be a 2-year program to upgrade all the wiring system. Signal optimization, I think this one is very much tied to what we have been talking about this evening. The citywide signal optimization project that we talked about is a $5 million effort that we're going to start. We have scope of work been finalized. We are in the approval process right now, which are almost there, and we are going to start the advertisement sometime in September of this year. We're going to focus on Central Business District first, and that's going to be about roughly 1 year of effort on that one, and then we're going to build it to about 1,100 other signalized intersections citywide. Communication, again, a lot of our signals do not communicate with our command center, and that was one of the reasons that we were doing these things manually. That's about $4.5 million effort, 35% design. Actually, it's a little bit more than 35% design is completed already, and we expect to start construction sometime of fall of 2019 on that. Traffic Management Center and ATMS, about $4.5 million. We are in the process of developing an RFP. We have a consultant should be coming on board very, very soon, and that RFP will be finishing up in no, that should be 2019. So it will take, I don't think it will take that long, but about 6 months to 9 months, we'll have that RFP ready to do an open contract out in the market. And the ITS system, that's about, we have about $1 million. The design is about 35% complete, and construction should be in fall of 2019. So that's our recent update on those projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first thing I'd like to address is DOT. Director, you acknowledged that DOT recognized that there was a problem, and you didn't know what was the cause of the problem, and you couldn't possibly have known what the solution to a problem is that you don't know the cause to. Was there any communication to the city council to say, hey guys, we have a really big problem. We're doing traffic signal synchronization. Council President Young introduced a resolution to bring you in here not more than 2 months ago, 2 months to the day actually, on May 9th. So was there some communication to the Council President's office or to my office, being the one who represents all the Central Business District?
No, we did not communicate with you.
So
And what I must say is I didn't even communicate with my superiors in the government, because I knew we had to figure it out. And what happened after 24, 48 hours, I should have kicked it in.
I'm disappointed by that response, and I can only say that I hope that this is a lesson learned, because it is unacceptable to not communicate problems of this magnitude to the city council. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the administration. You all can handle that on your own, but that's unacceptable, and I genuinely hope it's a lesson learned. Mr. President, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, we get all of the complaints, and if we knew that you all was, changing things and working on things, we could have gave a better response to our constituents that call us every day about the backup. But my question now is, will it be improved tomorrow? Would it be improved the rest of the week? Because what I saw this morning, I didn't see any change. So I'm hoping that, at least by Monday, we're going to see some improvements, because we cannot have this gridlock right in the middle of downtown.
So, Mr. President, I don't know what you experience, but every day we have problems on the system. Today, I went to a meeting downtown on Charles and Lombard, and when I got there, I was really happy to see that Tim Knight was there, our chief of permitting, because there was a lot of utility work in that intersection on both streets, and the traffic was backed up.
Yeah.
And he was making sure it was properly permitted. He was making sure that they weren't exceeding the areas that they were supposed to operate in. But because of the kinds of improvements, because folks are putting in new telecom, because BGE is upgrading the gas system, there is a lot of work that has to be done in the right-of-way in order to, renew our city. And so on any given day, there is some backup, there is some congestion, there is some unpredictability. But what we've seen overall is that we believe that downtown is operating better than it was when we began talking with you about optimization. I think it can still be even better once we do the citywide optimization. But the reality is that there are more cars coming to downtown than our network can accommodate. And so any disruption on the system is going to cause congestion. And on every single day, there's disruption to the system.
Well, let me ask you this. So you're saying that because of some of the construction that's going on by different companies, like fixing the lanes and all that stuff, is causing the backup?
Yes.
So
and what we do, we limit their work to non-rush hours when it's not an emergency. But what I saw today was at 10 o'clock this morning. It was outside of the rush hour time.
Okay.
And so, but downtown gets backed up all day long.
Can't some of that work be done on Saturdays and Sundays?
I'm sorry, what did
Can't some of that work be done on Saturdays and Sundays when there's not enough, a lot of traffic that's going on? And I understand that, people want to be off and stuff like that, but if you want to get a project done, you want to get it done when it's least disruptive to everybody's daily commute. I'm not worried about the county. I'm worried about people who live downtown, who live in the city, that's trying to get to their jobs, whatever. Because it took me 25 minutes to get to City Hall. And then I had to go to a meeting. I walked downtown. I walked because I knew driving wasn't going to get me there in time. So I just want you to know how serious this is. And we want, something to be done, because we don't want the calls. And we're getting the calls, and we're not traffic engineers. I can't get out there and direct traffic. And we just need to see some improvement quick.
Mr. President, I want to thank you you often talk about what existed before I came here, and one of the things that did not exist is a full transportation plan for the city, and it's a long-term thing. We're trying to do what we can with what we have in front of us, but the interconnectedness of all of these pieces is so important to maximize how our system flows. you know, I try to take advantage of learning from other cities in this country, around the world, and we're not the only ones experiencing the change in land use, a level of growth and change in our economy and the people who live here. And that is what the transportation system serves. We are a victim sometimes of our own success. And right now, we're an added victim because our system is just so antiquated. And so while we do these upgrades over the next year, while we prioritize our limited resources, we know we'll see improvements, and we know we'll be able to keep up better with the land use changes.
Director, can we take a moment to talk about Block the Box? So we recently passed an ordinance, which Council President Young sponsored, which reduced the fine to $125. If my memory serves me correctly, we passed that on third reader last Monday. Does that sound right, Kara? On Monday, July 9th. What's the status of that? Is that enforcement, because I see you have a map with 13 green intersections. Is that taking place now?
No, we have not started that. We wanted to talk back with you about where we are before we started. I think there are still a few minor details that we are working through in order to get all of our documentation and procedures in place in order to come back to you, give you a full update of where we are, and based on this hearing tonight, I think, hopefully have your okay and go ahead to begin that.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. My understanding is that there is now an issue over whether or not Block the Box is a stopping or parking violation versus an actual moving violation. Do we have someone here that can speak to the legal specifics of that so that the council can better understand what's going on?
Frank, do you want to join Toby? Do you want to come up? I think, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Toby Goodwin from DOT Safety. From DOT Safety. We recently asked for an opinion from our law office, and it was clarified with us that it is not considered a moving violation in terms of the vehicle being in the crosswalk, but it is considered a parking violation. And so we'll be able to proceed ahead with the process that you have asked us and the President has asked us to do at the appointed time that you all approve us to move forward.
Thank you, Chief Goodwin. Appreciate it. So based on what Chief Goodwin is saying, you'll have everything that you need legally to proceed with enforcement of Block the Box. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. I would like to confirm it, but yes, from what we heard from Mr. Goodwin, yes.
Okay. And the last thing before I go to next question is Councilman Scott. The worst violator of Block the Box in this city, in the downtown central business district, is without question MTA buses. What are we doing about that? And what are we going to do to stop that? Do we need to start citing MTA buses?
Yes.
So we're going to start citing MTA buses.
We need to start citing them. I've had discussions with the MTA administrator. He informed me that in his morning sessions, he advises drivers not to do that. They've really been improving their technology. They're focusing on moving buses more quickly and efficiently, and they have more technology to see what's going on. I don't know if they're going to use that in order to see if there are violators, but I will remind him that we are deploying this program and that we will ticket his drivers if they block the box.
I certainly appreciate that. I know that Mr. Quinn has always been responsive to us, and I have no doubt that he will be responsive to you. I'm not sure I agree with the technology part. I drive my car every day in the city, and I have enough common sense to figure out if I'm going to make it to the other side of the intersection and not block the crosswalk before the signal finishes being yellow and turns to red. So I don't find that to be necessarily a satisfactory excuse or explanation for why those buses continue to do that. But we need to make sure that that changes. I would certainly appreciate if you would send something in writing this week to Mr. Quinn, reminding him of that and reminding him of your conversation that you will begin citing his buses and copying the council on that. I think that would be very useful, a good step forward on that issue.
Will do.
Councilman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, I want to thank you for being here this evening and for your work for the city. But I just want to echo the sentiments of the council president and chair before I ask my first question and just say that this is what happens when people don't communicate, when agencies don't communicate with the council. We are the group of officials who are closest to the ground. Like the president said, we're going to get the complaints first, we're going to get them most often, and we're going to get them in every shape and form and fashion. And these kind of things can be avoided through constant communication. But my first question is around this issue of the traffic. Can you tell me like how in real time the folks at the TMC during peak hours are talking to the folks like the STOs out on the street as they're communicating? Are we rerouting people based off traffic, how it is that day? Are we staffing it at a good level during peak hours?
I'd like for Frank Murphy to come up. Frank has really worked on this for so long. He can tell you in detail how that works.
Good evening, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, and members. We have probably not as much real-time communication as somewhat after the fact. We get a lot of information from the TOs. I was talking to Toby just today about how much good information we get out of the agents and the TOs because they're out every day witnessing things, and they've helped us on a lot of things. And the TMC, they monitor the cameras. We have a limited number of cameras, and they're pretty much downtown and then along the JFX. So we could use a wider area, and that's part of what we hope to do with some of the money we're going to be investing over the next couple of years. So the incidents are something that are usually communicated right away. A TO will observe something, or the TMC will see something and pass the word right away. For more routine things, those are more not necessarily time of when they occur as later, or we may get an email from Toby or something says, hey, my agents have noticed A, B, and C, or a condition that we've seen, or maybe a place where we might let them know, for example, where we see illegal parking happening frequently, or like every day somebody stops at the liquor store at 33rd and York and 33rd and Green Mountain blocks a lane. So we'll target enforcement for something like that. So there is feedback, but it's not necessarily immediate.
So I guess the question is that do we have that capability? Like, for example, for me, it would be very simple to have them have radio capability. We'll take a different agency. So in the police department and city watch, they have someone with a radio who's able to say, like, hey, such and such is happening at the corner of, Gay and Fayette Street, and radio it to somebody to actually get out and deal with that issue. Don't we have that same capability in the TMC to be able to, in real time, work with Chief Goodwin's folks who do great work to say, hey, look, traffic is light here in this area right now at this point. Can you move to this place? We seem to be having a severe backup in this area, and having that communication go back and forth. I just feel like in 2018, that's like the bare minimum of what we should be able to do is communicate in real time with our employees who are working out on the street. And they're doing great work, but they could be used more efficiently.
So that does happen. Can it happen better? Yes. And so our three-prong approach to dealing with traffic, a big part of it is involve the Traffic Management Center. Our cameras need to be upgraded. Our screens need to be upgraded. They need to be pointed at these critical spots that we know can be recurring problems so that we can be more proactive and responsive. So that happens, but it still is a lot of cell phones. It's a lot of anecdotal, but there hasn't been a time that I've called Toby, Frank, folks in the TMC and the boots on the ground that they're not responding. But could we better integrate that? Yes, and that's some of what we're spending all this money for.
Well, the assistant director was saying that it only happens in the instant of a big event. So what we're saying is that we need to know how does it happen, right? Does it happen only in a big event? Is that happening through cell phone communication? Do they have the radios that they communicate? Like, how exactly is it happening? What kind of
Could I have
incidents are
Mr.
being
Marshall come
used?
up and-
I'm not finished yet.
Sure.
What kind of incidents are being used to get that information out in real time? Because we're hearing two different things. We want to know what's happening real time and what isn't.
Good afternoon again, Councilman Toby Goodwin, DOT Safety. Our TOs are equipped with Motorola radios. We're in constant communication with 311 operators. So any type of traffic or parking complaint that may come in, they immediately communicate it to our officers on the ground. That's throughout the day from 6 a.m. till 11 p.m.
Thank you. And Chief, but do they have that same, are they able to be radio from the TMC is the
The
question?
TMC does have the capability to switch channels
Do
to
that.
talk to us, but they try to stay with 311, I mean, the 311 operators at BCPD to communicate with us on the ground.
Right, because what I'm thinking about here is no one's going to be sitting in traffic here on Fair Street and call 311 in about traffic, right? They're going to just sit there in that traffic. But if we have all these cameras that can actually see that, and we have someone in the TMC that can actually radio that in to a CO that may be, let's just say, on Baltimore Street or somewhere else, then we're able to more efficiently use our resources and handle problems as we move forward.
Yes, sir. We have a pretty good communication system within DOT, and we're all working together within the organization to make sure that those type of incidents are reported out to the field as soon as possible.
Thank you.
The $4.5 million line item is about upgrading that center, the cameras, to do exactly what you just talked about.
Mr. President,
Thank you. In that traffic management center, can't they see the whole picture of traffic and what's going on?
So there are screens that are tied to cameras all over the city. Unfortunately, maybe half of them work, maybe not even that many.
Okay. Well, the ones that are working, that are looking at what's happening in the downtown area or coming off of 83, I know there used to be, signs that says, traffic delay, those kind of things. We don't see them
Variable
anymore.
message signs.
And like when someone has, kidnapped a kid, you get that little
Get those
thing.
alerts.
Why can't we have that connected as a, something to the public that, there's a traffic jam here, use this route or use that route. I think that would make a whole lot of sense. Just like we get the alerts for those kind of things, we should get alerts when we know that there's traffic back up because they see it in the center. Regardless of whether all of them are working or not, they can see what's happening and they can see the traffic patterns and how they're developing so they can send out, the little tweets, warning people that you need to take another route. Not that we want to put a lot of traffic on other streets, but at least people will understand enough.
Or they'll just stay home or, go a totally different way. So what you described is definitely a goal we have and we'll include in our plan how we get to that point for sure.
Okay.
Councilman Scott.
Thank you. Madam Director, just to add to what the council president is saying, and I know that you guys communicate with him every day, especially Chief Goodwin, but also, have you guys talked to like the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice who is on taking a new camera expansion and multiple things of camera expansion and see how you guys can partner with them to use those as well?
Definitely. There are a lot of cameras around, and we definitely provide our feeds to the police department. We don't always, the way our cameras are focused versus how theirs are focused tend to be a little different sometimes. But we're using the information we get from the red light and speed cameras. They give us a lot of good information as well. We're deploying a program to look at all of the information we're getting from our devices and from 311 and service requests to be proactive around how we're going to provide for transportation improvements. So I'm really hoping over the next year we'll be able to come to you tell you about where we're focusing our attention next, how we're going to get to the whole city and really kind of upgrade the whole system.
Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of my, I guess, major issues related to the way we manage our public right-of-way is how we deal with utilities. And primarily my focus had been the fact how we deal with street cuts. Oftentimes, we would have utility work in the street, we'll come pave it back over, and then months later, we're opening up the street again. And so there seems to be a lack of coordination as it relates to how we deal with the coordination of utilities in that way. But it seems like there's some other issues related to coordination of utility, now that we're talking about traffic and congestion. Can you share with us, what is the coordination that happens between, DOT and I guess DPW and private contractors as it relates to the utility work? I know that there's a lack of communication as it relates to the street cuts, even to the degree where I think, for example, with BG&E, their system, they're on a different system than we're on. So, do we meet consistently and talk about, these projects and when they're coordinated and when they're supposed to happen? Or how are we getting surprised? I know you mentioned Mr. Knight being out on the street. That seems archaic to think that, that we would have staff on the street physically monitoring or visualizing the work in the street. That I would imagine that stuff should have already been coordinated months and months in advance.
A lot of questions here, but
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So first, I want to say that we now have a quarterly senior level meeting with BGE around utility coordination. It began with our streetlight efforts and has expanded into all the work that we do together. And I really feel that we're developing a real partnership. I mean, we can't do any of this work effectively and really provide the best public space and travel experience if we don't work together. So that meeting is quarterly. And then we also have a regular meeting with DPW. Mm-hmm. And so one of the initiatives we've embarked on is we have a system that's called Invista. And all of the users of the public right-of-way have to put their construction information in Invista. It's a system that's used widely all over the country. Very good system. But what I found out was we weren't using it to look at advanced plans. We weren't using it to coordinate our future projects. We weren't using it to do what I've been calling build it once. And so we have a team that has, beginning this year, we've layered in just basic GIS until we can get everything in Invista. Our programs, BGE has given us all of their information regarding their, what's their gas program called? BGE gas. Regarding their gas program. They have a lot of money that funding from the state where they're improving all the gas lines all over the city. They've given us their 2 5-year program, and it's all in GIS. They've given us their electric program. It's all in GIS. DPW has given us their water program. It's all in GIS. DPW has given us their sewer program. And I believe you've seen our program. We've geocoded our program. And so right now, our next meeting, we're going to have that map with all the lines on it. And unfortunately, most of those lines are going to be in different places. But we've committed that as much as possible, we're going to make those lines overlap, and we're going to make the timing overlap. And we're going to stop building it once, twice, 3 times in the same place. And if we use Invista to do that, it won't be something that Michelle Pouchot is saying. It'll be a system that will be here for the city to use now and forever. And so that's what we're doing with coordinating work. The next question was?
I think you may have answered most of them. I think it's amazing.
The other thing is about permitting.
Yes.
And so we use Invista for permitting as well, and it works well for permitting. but we don't have an online system where people can apply online for permits. And so because of that, we don't have an electronic database of when things are coming in, when they're going to be on the street, and then how they're going to be coordinated. So that's something that's in our wheelhouse to improve as well, and it needs to rise to the top. The reason why, and so because we have these blanket permits, because we have our automation is being upgraded, we both don't have all the automation we need, and we need training, quite frankly. We need to improve our capabilities of using what we already have. And so we're embarking on looking at, when I arrived at DLT, there was very limited funding for training. And I have folks, coming on board with professional certifications and credentials that are required to go to training to keep those credentials. And so we're looking at training for everybody. We need to train the folks with the boots on the ground because they can do work in a different way and be more effective, improve their skill sets, and provide for better service. But back to the permitting, it's back to really having better systems that are integrated with our the people we work with. Another kind of anecdotal thing, and so we use Salesforce to communicate with 311 to deploy our resources. And BGE uses something else. And so even though we have a system that works, BGE has a system that works, those systems aren't integrated. Right now, we're spending the money to integrate and have one system with BGE. And so, it doesn't do anybody any good for us to point fingers. We have to be on the same page and work together. And I know that the agreement to do this is getting us where we need to be.
And, Mr. Chair, if I can ask one more
Please.
question. I know that you said that in order to restore or to restore steady flow of traffic, that we've returned the system back to the baseline. And maybe you said it and I didn't hear it, but so what were we trying to fix? What was the tweak in the system? What benefit were we trying to achieve that, now we've returned back to, I guess, to what it was, which I'm assuming was deficient in some way, or we wouldn't have messed with the system at all?
So we have to make adjustments to the signal system as new developments come online. So since 10 years ago, downtown has changed drastically. Typically, signals are upgraded every 3 or 4 years. And so as you can see, it's been a long time since we did that citywide in a comprehensive way. And really, every time you make a change in one place in the entire city, it affects the entire network. Mm-hmm. So over the 10 years, we made adjustments for, I don't know well enough to give you kind of examples of something big that may have come online, but if a new stadium came, if some new convention center, we would have to tweak the system for that. So we have this system that we've been tweaking over time that's, been working well. And then we came and talked to you about Don't Block the Box, and we agreed that we don't want to be punitive. We're not doing Don't Block the Box to hand out tickets. We're doing it because too many people, too many bus drivers block the box. And we've got to do something to change that behavior. And so ticketing, when you hit people's wallets, that's what changes their behavior. But because we didn't want to be punitive, we talked with you all about synchronization, optimization. We thought, well, yeah, let's do one more thing to really help discourage it, to really, sometimes you can have traffic flow in a way where once it's stopped, it's not going to back up into the box. And we tried that, but we couldn't do it. We returned it to baseline because at certain times of the day, we physically cannot prevent the traffic movement from if people don't stop behind the stop bar, That's that white line, you know, right before the crosswalk. If you don't stop before the crossbar, even though the light is still green, when a car is stopped in the crosswalk on the other side, if you don't stop there while the light is still green, you're going to block the box, because the throughput, the capacity, cannot handle enough cars to back up. When we do the citywide optimization again, it's going to get better. But again, without options to get some of these cars off the street while we're doing all this great development, we got to have people just calm down, relax, and abide by the traffic rules. And maybe we all need to go back to traffic school.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Clark, Vice Chair Clark.
I like Councilwoman. Thank you.
Councilwoman it is.
Ms. Purcell, first of all, bus drivers have pressures on them, not to start out by talking about what are mostly women, but I've spent a lot of time listening to the kind of pressures they're under. So in working with MTA, it's not so much about the bus drivers, it's about the pressures they're under to meet certain goals. And so that's a complicated conversation, but it's worth having, because in the long run, that is the conversation that will work. If MTA, as manager of bus drivers, works with you, DOT, as well as the drivers, the operators, and comes to agreements, it'll work better.
And good goals, right?
Yeah, they're good. They're a hardy crew driving those buses. So I'm not a very techie person, so let me just get basic. I know you all came here and we were worried about blocking the box, and you all went out and tried to do something to prevent it, and the system wasn't up to it, and we went crazy.
Yep.
Same people. Here we are again. So you're back to baseline. Forget about the box for a minute. You're back to baseline. Does that mean you're back to the way the system was working before the first hearing? I mean, did you put everything back the way it was? Or what do you mean by baseline?
I call it baseline because it's not the way it was the date that we began the change for Don't Block the Box.
It's
I
not
believe
the same.
it's better because it is a known, programmed operation where we know how every intersection is timed, and it's based on a truly interconnected network and not one that has been tweaked to be responsive to individual
That's
changes.
that's not what I'm asking. One day, you all said, we got this problem, we don't want people blocking the box, the city council's going crazy, because they don't want people getting tickets if the lights aren't synchronized. So you all went out and tried to address that problem. And in doing so, learned that it's not that simple to do, to change a series of lights, or signals, and so we ended up with massive traffic jams in lots of areas of certainly the downtown, to the extent that I know I personally sat through 3 green lights right by Mercy Hospital on Guilford Avenue, thinking finally that I was Charlie on the MTA and I would never be out of that intersection. So that didn't work. You went back to baseline. So it's not what it was before this all started. It's something different, but you haven't got all these coordinated systems going on yet. What are you using as the basis for how the traffic is now. What are your, not what are your technical achievements, what are your common sense achievements that you're using to get the traffic rolling again in a reasonable way?
So we're using a documentation where we know exactly how every signal is operating.
Okay.
And that documentation is based on
What?
knowing the whole system and not a piece of the system. And because...
So you did all that in 3 weeks?
Yes.
So you went from, this is a mess, go fix it. We fixed it, it's a worse mess. Now we're going to go back, but we're going to go back to a coordinated system where we know how to do all these things. This all happened like in 3 weeks?
So let me tell you what's so amazing about this.
Yeah, well, when you're doing it, yeah, because it's hard to, I'm not fighting with you. I'm on your side. I want to get to work when I need to get to work, and I certainly want to get home at the end of the day. But how can we believe or imagine that this happens this way?
Because of technology. When the technology is fully operational, we have what we call timing patterns. And we have timing patterns for, morning rush hour, evening rush hour,
Sure.
weekend,
July.
4th of July. I can tell you a funny story about evacuation timing pattern tests for 4th of July. And those timing patterns go into effect with a push of a button when the system is interconnected.
And is it now and it wasn't before?
When you have manual devices on the system,
Yeah.
you cannot push the button. Right.
But now you can, or
No.
everybody went out manually?
So for 2 weeks, we were pushing a button, tweaking, pushing a button, tweaking. And in one day, when we went back to baseline, we pushed the baseline button, we deployed the people to the manual cabinets, they changed them in the cabinets, and that was it. We knew what we had. We weren't tweaking. We weren't wondering how we had changed this one and how this one was going to talk to this one. We knew how they were going to talk. We knew it was a timing pattern that worked. We went back to baseline because that's the only thing we knew that would work based on the changes we had made over 2.5 weeks.
But baseline really isn't where you went.
Baseline is where we went minus what we did for buses when we did our bus prioritization program.
Okay, so it's a month. It started on June the 15th, and the baseline is established by the 12th of July. We've already talked about the changes, and then I'm not sure there's answers to this question, but one of the things I keep thinking as I'm listening to this, and you take for granted perhaps, we know when rush hour is. We know the major employment groups in downtown. We know for example, we know city workers by and large are going to be out at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and gone. Other workers at other industries and pathways have different kinds of hours. Okay. In other words, we know a lot about the way people move and when they move and where they move. Does that get figured into all this mechanical stuff, and then the role of the TOs, is that what we're calling? The role of the TOs is so important. It's the human factor that is missing when things don't run predictably and people get themselves in a jam. It's only some person showing up that's going to be able to straighten it out, whether it's getting you out of a garage where a whole industry has just quit for, gone for the day, or whether it's getting you out of an intersection where some 18-wheeler has decided to block it through 2, 3 lights.
So what we program when there's special events, baseball games, you see a lot of TOs out there then, because we know there's going to be a lot more traffic. People are going to be more impatient, and the TOs help people behave better and override the signals if the signals aren't providing for how things should flow. When we're in an incident and folks get, blocked up in their garage, whatever real incident or, a signal timing incident, redeploying TOs, because the TOs, they work hard. They're all over the city helping protect us on the streets.
Are they all over the city or mainly downtown? That's how they...
They're in areas of congestion, luckily we have school crossing guards, but they're at schools when we need them there. They're at places, not that every place doesn't need to be safe, but they're at places with high concentration of people, of children, of cars. And so we deploy them to maximize the benefit to make it the safe for most people. So when something happens, we're on the phone with Mr. Goodwin. He's looking at where his people are at the time. If there's anybody, he can call in, and he's moving them from here to there to be responsive to the incident.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilwoman. So the first thing, when we're overriding a signal manually with TEOs, what happens when that's at an intersection that has cameras? My understanding is last Thursday, July 12th at 5 p.m., I just found out about this a minute ago, there was a TO that was bypassed the signal because it made sense and it helped with flow of traffic at that intersection of Pratt and Light, but the red light camera was going off. Those citations get waived?
So yes, those citations would get waived. If we issue a citation in that instance, unfortunately the hardship will be on the person who got the citation, but they need to let us know. We will validate our records and those citations will be waived.
Okay.
There is video, so video should be able to show us that
Okay.
they were waived
So
through,
presumably the TEO would be in the picture when
and
it
they
came.
wouldn't be issued a violation. That's correct.
You had asked us whether or not we were prepared to ask you to begin enforcing ban the box. My understanding is that there's a warning period that was discussed. How long is that warning period for?
We wanted to do 30 days. We could do a little longer, maybe 45, but what we find is if that period is too long, people know they're not going to get tickets, and then, it really impacts the ability of our people to be effective.
Brandon, you good with 30? Mary Pat, you good with 30?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Thank you.
I like 30. It's a nice
So-
round number.
Our consensus is that 30 days is an appropriate period of time for warnings, and then immediately after, on the 31st day, DOT should begin enforcement. How soon can we begin issuing warnings for?
So I need to collaborate with my team. I want to make sure we have everything in place with the new citations, with the new violations. We've trained our people. We've identified intersections. We have begun working with the Downtown Partnership again so that they would work with their constituents on letting folks know ahead of time. So we'll get back with you within a week, if that's okay, to let you know when we'll roll it out.
Yes, that works. And Karen, the bill's been enacted into law by the mayor, correct? Okay. So if you could get back to the committee in writing by was that Wednesday, July 26th. And I think a reasonable expectation is that warnings would begin being issued on August 1st, no later than August 1st. Colleagues? Thank you. What is the required time frame and standard for restoring the street after utility work? Is that written down somewhere?
I don't know that.
Assuming that's a Frank
Does anyone here?
question or a Tim question.
Anybody? Sorry, we don't have anyone here who.
David.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. David Fram, Department of Transportation. The question was the time frame to pave a street after the street cut?
Required time frame and standard for, I don't expect you to rattle off the standard. I'm just,
The standard, I do not know, but to the best of my knowledge, it's within 30 days.
within 30 days after a
The
street.
the job is completed.
Is that in DOT policy?
I do not know.
I think we should look at minimizing that time frame. We can't have unrestored streets in the right of way, sidewalks as well, for up to 30 days while we're waiting for BGE, Verizon, Comcast, Crown Castle, Citizens, Veolia to come in and finish that work. Can we begin to, Director, can you begin to look at that and what we need to do to decrease that time frame? Councilman Scott?
And while we're at it, Mr. Chair, just because this is an issue that one of the most common issues that many on the council have to interface with DOT about, because, for example, I was just walking around the community a couple months ago and found out that BGE had basically torn up every sidewalk and a portion of every street to do, some kind of work, and they just left it there for a whole year. It was done last June, and it wasn't until DOT was notified that they went back out. So we should really be going back and checking and making sure. We were told that policy was in place, but clearly if we're consistently finding places that have been that way, we understand if the work is done in the middle of winter, you can't repair it with concrete, but if it's done in June, we shouldn't have to wait till the next June or July to have it done.
That's right. Can I say
Mr.
something?
Chair, we have an existing street cut policy, so I would like to get you the exact information from that policy, but Mr. Khalid has embarked on updating that policy, and so we will work with you on what is a more appropriate time and how we embark on that.
That's great, thank you. I have a copy of the street cut policy. It may not be the most recent version, but if we could make sure that, Mohammed, that you're focusing your lens on how do we strengthen that to hold those entities that are cutting in our right of way to ensure that they restore it as quickly as humanly possible. Councilwoman?
Well, I just wanted to add to what my colleagues have already said about that. Actually, it's city government that comes in and remediates its own, basically, they're the most reliable vendors out there, the city of Baltimore. When DOT or Public Works does cuts into the sidewalks or the roads, they're reliable, well, maybe sometimes with a call, for getting back out there and remediating the damage. But I rely on city people to help get the BGEs and not to name brand names, but the private vendors out there to come back and finish the work that they leave for years on end. And it seems to me that we have city stat again, don't we? We have a city stat going on. That's a perfect city stat kind of thing to do, is look at who's making cuts, who they are. When they get a permit, and they get a permit to do that, then let it go to city stat, and let city stat have to track that these vendors are getting these remediated, not all of our city people who do it with and for us. Yeah. It's ridiculous. You can watch things age, holes age in place.
And
And
we
it's
were-
not our people. It's private people, and then we have to get into the act of chasing them down, and they don't work for us.
We were with the mayor's team looking at our city stat inputs. DOT is the second agency to come online with city stat. And for some reason, all of the street cut entries need to be recreated. So we're on top of that, and you'll
Well,
be happy to see.
if we just start now,
Right.
and start doing it now, and hand it to City Stat, and let them do their thing, their data thing, and make sure that they come back and fix things. That's a huge issue out there.
The mayor is really holding our feet to the fire on doing that. And
Yeah,
so
and well, that's
we're
what they're
excited
for.
about
They're to count
figuring it out.
things and make sure things get done while everybody else has a job.
Good.
Yeah, very
Director,
exciting.
can someone get the committee a copy of the email that was sent to the utilities as well as a distribution list of that? Thank you. I was in the meeting with Downtown Partnership yesterday. I certainly appreciate Tim and his team being there. Kenny, I know you were there. Certainly appreciate all the work you guys do. Overarching theme here is that the communication has been lacking. We expressed that during the meeting yesterday. Downtown Partnership, which is made up of all the property owners who pay the property tax surcharge in the Central Business District, is very effective at communicating and communicating what's going on in the CBD and around it to its stakeholders and its members. So my hope is that DOT does take those comments that we made yesterday very seriously about their ability to assist the city in communicating information. They have an ability to hit tens of thousands of people in a matter of minutes. So we need to make sure that we're utilizing them like the partner that they are.
Could I, so Invista works really well with the work that's going out there now, and the training is being set up for
Excellent.
the Downtown Partnership as we speak to bring them online with being able to see in Invista what's going on and help us with that.
I appreciate that, and while I've already taken the training, please keep me looped in on when the training is occurring with Downtown Partnership. I could always do training twice.
You can do one for me.
He
I'll
likes
I'll
Invista.
just tell you how it works.
Yes, ma'am. Last piece is, there was an issue, yes. There was an issue about 2 years ago. This has nothing to do with the DOT. BPD was unable to issue a citation for something, and I can't recall. And I asked the council president, he couldn't either. Councilman Scott, do you remember what that was? They couldn't issue a citation for something because they waited about 6 months to order new citation books.
That was the, Mr. Chair, that was the bus lane, after the bus lane, they couldn't issue tickets.
That was DOT.
Yes, DOT. Somebody else was, MTA police were issuing them, but we weren't because of a change in ticket books.
And we were losing out on revenue because of that.
Yeah, I think it was a couple $100,000, I believe, or something like that.
Okay. Can we, tomorrow, start working on making sure we check the boxes so that we're ready to go on this? So you guys don't come back on August 1st and say, we wanted to start today, but we can't start for another week or month or whatever. So let's just make sure we're fully prepared as you kind of cross the T's and dot the I's and get ready to go, and you're going to communicate with us in a week. Everything's done to prepare with the goal of starting on August 1.
Yes.
Thank you, Director. Councilman Pinkett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Purcell, based upon this evening's hearing, it sounds like you inherited an agency that was a mess. And I'm curious that upon accepting the assignment, did you or a team do an analysis or assessment of the current, or at that time, the current status of the Department of Transportation? And if so, is that available? And if not, what else should we expect? Because it seems like this could just be the tip of the iceberg related to how dysfunctional the Department of Transportation was prior to you coming on.
So I wouldn't use those words.
Well,
I came to an organization that has been experiencing severe disinvestment. I came to an organization that had been structured around providing maintenance and had been doing a good job of doing maintenance. The time had come to renew the full infrastructure. I mean, infrastructure is very resilient. It lasts generations. But when it gets old, that's it. The infrastructure here is old. It's really old. And the funding in the department has decreased exponentially. If you look at the HUR money that was coming in the department some 5 years ago, it was 10 times the amount we get now. And so I inherited an organization that's been really struggling to do the job that they know how to do, but at a time where not only is there not funding, not only is there not capacity in terms of the newest thinking and training on what to do to renew an old system, an organization where the city and the state had experienced dwindling resources over time and struggled to determine how to best use those resources. You know, what goes first? Bridge projects cost tens of millions of dollars. If you can delay a bridge project, you can do a lot of good somewhere else. That's the organization I inherited, and one that just wasn't very transparent with what needed to be done. And so I knew I was going to need to bring on a team to help me really understand where we are and figure out where we need to go in terms of renewing the infrastructure, returning relationships with our partners, because everybody uses the public space, understanding the capacity of the team. No, I don't have an assessment that I can give you, but I think when I did my CIP presentation to the Planning Commission, I was able to capture some of these thoughts in a way that was tied to the way that we as a team looked at dedicating those limited resources to really begin to make a difference, and really dedicating resources to technology that had never been dedicated
right.
before.
And if I can interject, while I appreciate that, and I definitely can relate with the fact that the agency needs more funding, some of the stuff that you talked about this evening was related to quarterly meetings, a monthly coordination meeting with DPW, making certain that systems communicate with one another, that BG&E's projects are in Vista or whatever the software. That doesn't sound like investment. That sounds like management. And so there is something else that either was going on that needs to be fixed, and hopefully you're the person to do that. But this, I mean, there sounds like there was some other issues going on that are beyond just lack of investment. And I mean, we don't have to belabor the point. It just sounded like that from the testimony tonight, that it was just that from my perspective, in this word that I chose to use, that there was some dysfunction happening, or some things that could have happened that weren't happening as it relates to that agency. So no need to comment anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're going to move to the second phase of this hearing, which has to do with road resurfacing. I'm going to pass it over to Councilman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Director, thank you for being here. I didn't know before we asked questions if you wanted to address the issue at hand, or you had anything in particular you want to talk about the documents that were sent to us.
First, I want to apologize for the delay in getting the documents to you. I reviewed the package in response to the council questions that we received, and it was an oversight. So please accept my apologies for those documents not being transmitted initially, and then any recurring delay. One thing I know that we had provided early on wasn't probably in keeping with the way you had asked the question. So it was the way we've been accustomed to preparing those documents. And this evening you expressed, the council expressed a desire to have a different way, and we'll go back, and I think just kind of the clarity of information. So, but please accept my apologies. Know that we're trying to work with you for you to better understand where we're doing our work, the cost of doing that work. There's no secrets about it. It's just a matter of us documenting it and getting it out to you.
Thank you. And yeah, and I'll actually send a follow-up email to show for us to break down, and we've gotten it in the past this way. So we appreciate, I appreciate getting the full list, but especially for council members, and especially when they're having meetings with their constituents, to have it broken down, right? So in the past, we got it in 14 different tabs that shows each project for each district with the amount there, but also a spreadsheet that shows total for each council district, the amount that's spent there. But there are a couple of questions that I have based on the information that we were given. So there seems to be a lot of some discrepancy. So and also, Madam Director, for the general.
Sorry, I was just trying to make sure
that's
who's
fine.
here to help me.
For
if
the
I need
general
help.
public who's watching today and don't know about these things that we know about here, can you explain the difference between TEC and maintenance so that the general public understands the difference in those type of resurfacing projects?
So maintenance, there are a lot of things that go into maintenance. We're trying hard to define that now. But, pothole filling, taking care of a broken curb, things that probably are pretty apparent. But when we do resurfacing, we do resurfacing in a few different categories. And so when we mill and overlay, we call that maintenance. And in that case, all we do is take off the top level of the road, and then we replace it with asphalt. Sometimes we do a little more, and it's still probably in the category of maintenance, because if it's not a very local street, there may be curb, gutter, there may be some appurtenances, is that the big word, that are in the street that we have to take care of when we do that work. When we start doing more, so we like to do work that is more what I call property line to property line, because that's the full public space. And so the work that we do in DLT is really not just the street, it's not just the sidewalk, but we really should be looking from one side of the street of the property line to the other. And when we attack the street in that way, we're going beyond maintenance. And so there might be a little bit of a gray area in there, but for the most part, I think that's the way we define it. We are doing one additional item, though, in our efforts to really return our streets to become more what we call complete streets, more livable. We're looking at every one of our resurfacing jobs, whether they be maintenance, whether they be, a full street reconstruction, and we're asking the question, can we do more with this street to provide for not only safe vehicular movement, but better pedestrian, bike, just better pavement marking for parking, can we do anything to work with DPW around sustainability, environmental quality? And beginning this year, every single project has been looked at through this complete streets lens. And so we even have a little bit of a gray area around basic maintenance. But I'll tell you, and Mr. Ching is here, he'll confirm that local streets, when we resurface those, it's truly just maintenance.
Thank you. So my first question, for the list that was provided, so for you guys, and for the year of 2015, you guys told us that the total lane miles was 53.45. But if you look at what you guys presented to us in the budget this year, in your budget book, it says that the FY fiscal 15 was 61 lane miles. Can we talk about that discrepancy?
So unfortunately, we didn't come prepared to talk about all those numbers. I can tell you what it could be. And so in DOT, we have two different ways that we resurface streets. From the operating budget, which is the maintenance side, where local forces do all the work. And then on the engineering side, with the capital budget, where typically we have a contractor do the work. In some cases, what I found is those numbers aren't always merged together. So I don't know that that's what the issue is, but that could be a simple answer, but we'll go back and check and see what the real answer
Yeah,
is.
the same thing exists for the year 2016 based off what you guys provided to us here and based off what you said in the budget book as well. It says that the miles resurface would were actually 45, and that in this book, actually on the sheet, it says 39. So, and also I think that we would assume that the difference between in-house and the contracts would be greater than that because they typically get the larger contracts. So, because when we think about that,
the
that's
difference feels right to me too.
that amount of money and the amount of projects just being in purgatory is not a good thing. If you could provide that to us or figure that out as soon as possible. But then my next question to you guys is around what I said earlier. So you know that here, we on the council, we know the mayor feels the same way about open data. And we've been trying to get DOT to share this kind of information on Open Baltimore. How quickly will you guys be able to put this up? I think it's relatively an easy thing to do because you can do it in map form, you can do it in spreadsheet form for people to see, because when you look at this kind of thing, it also will help us inform the citizens, but we'll get information from it as well. I think, for example, the health department can tell you that we've seen that in recent days, in the last couple of weeks, that because they now share that information about health closures, they're getting more tips from the citizens around what places they should look at. And we would assume that the same kind of things would happen with streets because we get that kind of information at the council level where we think sharing that information could help, but also would help us get into a position where we are, because if you look at the maps that you guys provide to us, it looks like it's like shotgun blast, right? It's all over the place where we can figure out a way with the limited dollars. And, you know, I believe that you guys should have much more money to do this kind of stuff. And it would be great if we saw that, especially coming down from the federal level, if we get a federal government that really wants to invest in infrastructure and 21st century infrastructure, to be more specific. But can you talk about that data sharing and how we can get DOT to be a better partner with sharing data out to the public?
So hearing tonight the way you described how the information was provided in the past is really refreshing, and I think perhaps we weren't asking the right questions or of the right people, and so I'm really hoping that the capacity exists, that the person who had done it like that previously is in the organization. We found a lot of the city stat people in the organization, and when we found them, it kind of escalated our ability to do our work, and so we'll go back and look. I think we can easily resort the list the way you want it. We can get you the answers to the prior year questions, and we can load that information on our website, you know, very quickly, I don't know, within the week or whatever. I need to work with I guess BCIT, whoever's kind of doing the open data, but we're definitely a part of the team that wants to be more transparent. I'm just going to tell you quite frankly, though, that I don't like putting bad information up there. And validating kind of the, you know, it's a lot of information on that list. And so I don't want to be that person that prevents us from being transparent because we're taking too long to validate something. But there has been a process of really trying to make sure we're putting good data out there. And so we're working through that so that we can just be that much more transparent, timely about the information.
Yeah, and I'll just do it myself personally tonight. I'll send an email connecting you to the chief information officer so that we can, and they can help you with that. They're really good with doing that, and they can take this information and put it in a way that's simplified, but also a way that makes it flow with the rest of Open Baltimore. And then also, Director, if you also remember in the letter we asked for an increase, so we asked for the last 5 fiscal years so we can make that comparison. If we can include the guess this gentleman from the media that doesn't know that this council is not in support of one LeBron James or the Los Angeles Lakers. Since the chair did not say it, if you have cell phones, please
Technology
put them
problems,
on.
huh?
Please put them on vibrate or silent, or turn them off. But also, so we can have the longer look
Yeah.
from the last 5 fiscal years, so that we can see. Because I think that one of the things that we hear a lot, and something you and I talked about, because I work with Mr. Chang, Mr. Branch, and those folks that try to make sure it happens in my district, but try to see if we can do that citywide, to see how we can do continuous things, right? So one of the things, I know all of my colleagues get this, when we come and we do, the 400 block of Utah, but we don't do the 500, and it's just as bad, and then we don't do it the next year, and it goes looking at working so that we can typically go through areas that we know have not been invested in, and just because citizens will accept that if they know that, hey, we're planning out years in advance how we're going to do that. Like, my neighborhood will get significant resurfacing and infrastructure improvements in the next few years. If they can see that information, then I think that folks can accept that. But when things are done as they feel in secrecy, they're more unwilling to accept that. Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you. Director, you may have touched on this earlier, but when I guess private entity, cuts into our right of way, let's say, for example, BG&E does work, what is the requirement of them as it relates to repaving? And then I guess my second question would be, and we talked a little bit about it when we were talking about coordination, do we overlay their projects over our investments, or do we try to steer them? Well, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but are our investments being made, in areas where we know that they are cutting into the streets, so that there's a better coordination? But I kind of want to understand what is the requirement, for those entities when they do cut into the street, and do they do the work, or do we do it?
So let me start by saying we talk about BGE a lot, and I like to talk about BGE and DPW, and
Okay.
We have problems with them, but for the most part, they're good soldiers. And so for the most part, the problems we have are with the smaller providers. So the telecoms tend to be a bigger issue for us. But, there's issues throughout, but I just wanted to kind of say on the record that BGE isn't always the problem. A lot of times when we get the calls in the middle of the night and a contractor is out there working, it is really, a smaller organization that we've permitted the work for. So then the second thing is about street cut policy, or procedures. And so we have manuals and requirements and policies around how we permit the work. We have details on how they can cut the street, how they restore the street, when they have to do it. I haven't read those. I haven't looked at them. But a lot of what I have found and what we have is sometimes it's bifurcated. It's not. I'm looking at Muhammad because if he wants to come up and talk, okay.
Oh, you don't want to touch this.
But so we have all that. But it's up to us to inspect. It's up to them to be, good soldiers and do what they're supposed to do. And so I was really happy about the conduit program. So we have a very detailed conduit program. We have a fee associated with that. We have requirements on how we work on the conduit system. We have a process where we work with our main conduit users, BGE, to prioritize where we do our work. And guess what? We have a lot of money because you, the council, the city, before I got here, passed a law requiring that folks pay for the restoration of that service. And then when the mayor got here, she made sure she settled the lawsuit around getting it done. Am I saying that right? Do I have my chronology correct? And so what we were able to do is hire a consulting team that is really providing for us a state-of-the-art operation on how we plan for that construction, how we coordinate with our partners on that, money to hire inspectors to make sure people do the right thing. We're using that model to update our street cut policy, and we're going to be coming to you because the fee for permits and the fee for street cut is way too low. So we need to increase the fee. And with that, we'll be able to go from what we're doing today, which is having various policies that may not be integrated, that is one street cut policy,
And-
a known way to do the work and working better with our partners.
And part of the reason I asked the question is because oftentimes when I ride around, I see a lot of patchwork in the streets. I see where half the street is newly paved and the other half isn't paved. Even when I was looking at this map, I think of a community like Reservoir Hill and Penn North that is experiencing a lot of BG&E gas pipe work, but I don't see any of our investments, aligned with that gas pipe work, which means that if BG&E, and I know this case it is BG&E, but if they come back, it means that half a street is going to be paved. For example, Utah Place is undergoing significant gas pipe work, but our bike infrastructure and repaving is going to happen for another year and maybe a year and a half. And so I just don't understand how this just seems like this should be better coordination of these efforts, because especially, we already said that we have precious few resources. It's going to require that we coordinate these things better to maximize the resources that we have. And
I got a call from BGE after our council hearing, and the council made it clear that they wanted us to look at when BGE, when whoever does a single lane of work, that they not just restore that one lane, but they repave the whole street. And BGE has been calling, asking us about where we are with that, how is that proceeding, and we're really excited that that's on the record, and that's something that we're going to work with our partners to find the best way to achieve. And I really believe you're going to see a change going forward.
okay, we're hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Scott.
Thank you. Madam Director, when you guys go back and check those numbers from the budget book as well, could you go back and check the actuals for the lane miles too? Because based on the number provided here and just some simple math, it seems that the lane mileage that is in the book will actually be off based on the numbers provided, but we know again that those numbers are now in question.
We will.
And then are we making sure that have we looked at the cost for us to do lane mileage versus other in-house versus other jurisdictions to make sure that we're in alignment with that? Like, so for us, if it's costing us $150,000, we're not going to see other jurisdictions of similar size and similar infrastructure where it's costing $100, right?
We haven't done that yet, and I think that's a good thing to look at. We have done some analysis of in-house versus contractor, and we know that we have efficiencies doing work in-house when we can. The other question you asked earlier, I just wanted to ask if we could get you the orange cone list resorted the way you want it for the last 3 years first. That way we can get that to you quickly and then add on the additional 2 years.
That's quite all right. And then my last question, thinking about that, have we dealt with this, have the processes, and something that you and I spoke about when you first got here, where we've had several instances in recent years where we have had a contractor redo a main street, for example, Calvert Street downtown, and then we had to have them come back because they basically screwed the street up. Have we implemented a policy but also fixed those loopholes where we're consistently giving contracts to people who we're consistently having to call back out to fix work that they have supposedly done for us?
So we are well along the way with putting in place a system that will provide for that to happen. So we have what we call now our Performance Program Management Office. We have under contract highly recognized firm that is in the process right now of reviewing our CIP, our current CIP process, and how we do our work. We're looking at DPW. DPW really has a very good program management system. So we're looking at what they have, and we've partnered with them to try to make that better. And so there are layers of the system. And we were just talking about this recently. Performance evaluation of contractors is a part of that system. And if we don't have good performance evaluations that are integrated in the file of the contractor, that is, you know, in the city database, we're limited with what we can do with not using them as a low bidder, let's say. And so we're looking at all those modules. We're looking at software that's existed a long time. It's important that we use what the industry has, because the industry has used this a long time, and we're going to be communicating electronically. I must say, Alma Bindi is one of the best in the country in terms of knowing about infrastructure. She's highly credentialed, she's detail-oriented, and she's holding all our feet to the fire with getting it done. And so I'd love to come in and give you a presentation at the right time with where we are with that.
I think that'd be great. One of the issues that has consumed an overwhelming amount of my time on the council has been lack of coordination on utility work and work in the right of way. And I think all parties are somewhat guilty in that. And we've been told time and time again, well before you got here and even before the current mayor, that was being addressed, and it has not effectively been addressed. I could name 12 examples off the top of my head just now of streets that have been dug up. They are restored, and then 3 months later, BG is out there, or DPW, or DOT. So it seems like we've really failed in terms of effective asset management of those assets, whether those are our utilities and conduit underground, or private utilities and conduit, as well as our road surfaces. And what that results in is millions and millions of dollars that are lost every year to taxpayers in the city. And for those who argue that, well, when BGE doesn't do this, or it's their fault, or Comcast or Verizon, those costs still get passed on to the taxpayers in terms of rate increases or a lack of a rate decrease. So we'd really like to see some focus on that. Councilman Scott.
I'm done, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
Director, thank you very much for coming in. We look forward to hearing back from you. We're going to go into recess now and not vote this out. Hopefully we don't have to come back here and things are going to improve, and we're looking forward to that. So thank you. We're now in recess.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, Chief.